Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, complaints against the Sheriff's Department. How long does it take for a response? KPBS sued the department for the records, and now we have the answer. Plus, the number of San Diego students struggling with homelessness is on the rise, but a local college is working to change that. And out with the old, in with the new. Our trolley system is getting an upgrade, but what happens to the old trolleys? KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. It's Monday, June 3rd. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. Tonight, a follow-up on a KPBS investigation. After concerns from citizens, we looked into how long it takes the San Diego Sheriff's Department to respond to complaints. KPBS had to sue to access these records. Now, KPBS investigative reporter Claire Tragesser tells us what she found.
People file complaints about everything from feeling like an officer was rude during a traffic stop to sexual assault. One deputy is currently on trial for allegedly assaulting multiple women. They say their complaints to the department were ignored. The data KPBS sued for shows that 72 complaints made to the Sheriff's Department never got a response of any kind. That's about a sixth of the total complaints received. Of the complaints that did get a response, 42 people had to wait more than a month. The average response time was 13 days. KPBS compared those numbers to the San Diego Police Department. Their average response time to complaints was 12.7 days. The Sheriff's Department handed over these numbers last week after KPBS sued.
So, Claire, tell us about this lawsuit.
Right. So about a year ago, we asked the Sheriff's Department for the dates that they received complaints and the dates that they responded to those complaints. And we felt like that was a pretty straightforward request, but the department said no. So then we worked with lawyers at Shepard Mullen Law Firm to try and negotiate to get those records. We even offered to compromise and say, give us just a sample of the dates, and they still said no to that. So in January, we filed a lawsuit to get the records. And after that lawsuit was filed, the San Diego County indicated that they might be willing to negotiate for a settlement. And so we worked on that. And then last week, the settlement was reached, and we got all of the records, not just a sample of them.
So why did you make the request?
Well, it started after multiple women accused a sheriff's deputy of sexually assaulting them, and they said that they sent in letters to the department, complained to the department, and never got a response. And so that made us want to ask, okay, does that happen a lot? So we just asked for the dates that people had complained and when they got a response to those complaints.
So how has the Sheriff's Department responded?
So they wouldn't do an on-camera interview, but I did talk with Robert Fagan, who's the chief attorney for the Sheriff's Department. And he said, yeah, there are some complaints that haven't received a response, but he said that there are reasons for that. For example, someone might be their complaint might be unintelligible, or say something like his quote, Martians landed on my yard, or the government is out to get me, and they wouldn't respond to those complaints. Or maybe someone doesn't have a return address, or they can't locate them, reasons like that.
So during the course of your investigation, any more details about how they handled complaints?
Yeah, so he said initially they track all of the complaints, the dates that they received them in a computer log, but then they don't go ahead and track when they responded. That changed in 2017. They got a new computer system, and they started also logging the dates that they responded to those complaints. But in past reporting that I've done on this, I spoke with Dave Myers, who is a 35-year veteran of the Sheriff's Department, and he says that there actually isn't really a set system for how they handle complaints, and he said that it makes the process ripe for abuse.
There's no other documentation. There's no other discussions. There may be a follow-up email, maybe to an immediate supervisor of what happened, and that would be the end of it.
And we should mention Myers retired last summer after unsuccessfully challenging Sheriff Bill Gore in the election for the sheriff.
So now that you've reached a settlement, what can you tell us about the terms of the settlement?
Right. So like I said, they provided all of the dates that they responded to these complaints. They also paid about $18,000 in attorney's fees. And our lawyers really need that money, need the attorney's fees to be able to take on cases like this. They can't spend all of their time and not get any money for it. The Sheriff's Department has argued that it was a waste of taxpayer money to do this lawsuit. I would say that they could have provided the records in the first place and avoided having to pay anything.
Very interesting. KPBS investigative reporter Claire Tregesser, thanks so much.
Thank you.
The nation's measles epidemic has surpassed a 25-year record, nearing 1,000 cases so far this year. While the virus has not reached San Diego, nearly 50 cases have been reported across the state. Experts say it's not clear when the wave of illnesses will stop.
And we're pushing 1,000 cases now.
There have been 971 measles cases so far this year. That eclipses the 963 measles illnesses reported for all of 1994. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention updated the numbers Thursday. It's been 27 years since the nation saw this many measles cases. More than 2,000 cases were reported in 1992.
For the past 20 years, measles has not had a foothold in the United States, but now we're in danger of it getting reestablished. That would mean that every unvaccinated child would be at risk for measles everywhere in the United States every day. So it's really important that we stop this outbreak now before it goes on any longer.
In most people, measles causes fever, runny nose, cough, and a rash all over the body. However, a very small fraction of those infected can suffer complications such as pneumonia and a dangerous swelling of the brain. Some are questioning whether this epidemic will be a repeat of the past.
Well, a question that's popped up is, how far is this going to go? Are we going to reach the levels that we're seeing in the early 1990s when there were more than 20,000 cases a year? The answer to that question is not clear. Some of the experts I talked to said it's not likely because circumstances were different back then. The vaccination recommendations were changed since then. A lot of poor kids had trouble getting access to vaccines, and there's been a federal program since then that make it easier for low-income families to get their children vaccinated. All that's changed, so there's optimism that measles levels won't reach how high they used to be.
The vast majority of this year's cases have been in New York City, but illnesses have been reported in at least 26 states, including here in California. Experts say parents refusing to vaccinate their children is a main cause of the outbreak.
Yeah, there's been a highly effective vaccine that's been available for decades, and U.S. vaccination rates have gone up to pretty high levels, but there are communities, there are pockets within the United States where vaccination rates are low, and one of them has been some communities, some neighborhoods in Brooklyn. And yeah, there have been concentrated efforts by people who have questions about vaccines or described as anti-vaccine people who have tried to convince parents not to get their children vaccinated, and that's been the root of these outbreaks.
But according to the CDC, those parents should not be concerned about vaccinations.
As a mother and as a doctor, I know that the measles vaccine is safe and effective. And I urge every parent to talk to their doctor about measles vaccine to make sure that their child is protected against measles.
The CDC recommends a combination measles, mumps, rubella vaccine for everyone over a year old, except for people who had the disease as children. Those who have had measles are immune and not at risk.
If you're fully vaccinated against measles, you should be protected for life. But some adults were not completely vaccinated or not vaccinated at all, and that means that they're still at risk for measles. The good news is that it's never too late to get a measles vaccine.
According to the CDC, for every 1,000 children who get measles, 1 or 2 of them will die from it. No deaths have been reported this year. Palomar Community College is looking for ways to help students deal with San Diego's expensive housing market. KPBS North County reporter Allison St. John says this is in response to recent reports that about 1 in 5 community college students experiences being homeless.
The Associated Students governing body at Palomar College is pushing for the College Board to allow students who are homeless to sleep in their cars overnight in this parking lot.
As you can see, I mean, there's no shortage of parking spaces in the lot behind me.
Business studies student Anthony White says he slept in his truck for 8 months when he started college.
And nobody wants to have somebody sleeping in their cars. I mean, that's the issue right there, but reality is that people are sleeping in their cars.
Palomar is one college that could be affected by a proposed state law that has just passed the California Assembly. AB 302 would require community colleges to provide safe overnight parking on campus by next year for students who qualify as homeless.
Parking lot 1 and 2 has several hundred parking spots, able to support, as many students as we foresee, needing it. Another point is that it's in close proximity to the bathroom and shower facilities, which are actually, just right up these stairs and right behind us here. So when we look at this environment, we look at what's going to be safe for our students, what's going to be discreet, one for the students, but also for the campus.
A study released this year of 57 California community colleges showed 19% of students reported being homeless with no stable place to live. More than 50% worried about having enough money to buy food. Palomar College recently opened a food and nutrition center where students can pick up food for free. It's privately funded. When it comes to students sleeping in the parking lot, there are concerns about the cost of providing security. Palomar College President Superintendent Dr. Joy Lynn Blake says she would rather find other solutions.
From an ethical and moral perspective, I think it's an indictment against our society that we're even having to pass legislation to have folks sleep in the parking lot.
The college is soliciting donors to help provide subsidized housing and has hired a consultant to look into building student housing on campus, the first community college in San Diego to do so. White says that's still out of reach for many community college students. He's advocating for both new housing on campus and access to parking lots for overnight stays. In North County, Allison St. John, KPBS News.
Palomar students have approved a plan to allow students to sleep in their cars overnight in campus parking lots. And as Allison mentioned, an assembly bill which would make the policy statewide is now heading to the state Senate. San Diego is getting more new trolleys, which means MTS will start decommissioning some of its older trains. So KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman was curious, what happens to these old trolleys?
Right now you can see it has the old logo, that old T logo with the circle. That was what we had when we opened up back in 1981.
Since 1981, there have been 5 generations of trolley cars, each getting more and more advanced.
This car had no computer systems on the car whatsoever. It was all camshaft controlled, so it would be like working on a 1950 Chevy. As opposed to the new cars, it's like working on a Ferrari. These new cars have 27 computer systems on the car.
MTS recently unveiled its newest trolley, which has an estimated $3.6 million price tag.
So we can go on board.
Trolleys in the 1980s ran around $825,000, and when they first hit tracks, they didn't have any air conditioning.
At the time, they were thinking, well, it's going to just operate up and down the coast of San Diego. We don't need air conditioning.
AC was added about a year after trolley service started. In general, San Diego is credited with creating the first modern trolley system in the country.
This was the renaissance of light rail, and from that it spawned 27 light rail systems throughout the country.
But those first series of trolley cars have been decommissioned in San Diego.
This is the first trolley ever to hit the tracks in San Diego. It went into service in 1981, and after about 2 million miles, it was decommissioned in 2015. Now, even though you won't see this model of trolley on the tracks anymore, there's still plenty of butts in these seats.
The city of Mendoza, Argentina bought a large portion of MTS's original fleet and kept the car's signature red coloring.
They purchased 18 of them, so they have 18 cars in Mendoza, Argentina now. We've worked with them over the years to make certain that the cars keep running, and they are.
The U.S. federal government even has some of the old cars.
And they use them for terrorist training.
Just like cars on the road, if you take care of trolleys, they will last longer.
These cars will operate 25 to 30 years. We maintain them very well. We could get more years out of them.
But unlike cars, electric trolleys can rack up millions of miles on the odometer. With the introduction of the 5th generation trolley, MTS is now looking to repurpose its 2nd generation cars.
We have 25 of them that will be available to be acquired by the end of this year.
MTS says it tries to avoid scrapping old trolleys.
We always like to have the cars that we decommission find a good home. We're prideful of our maintenance program. The cars are in excellent shape, and if they can get a second life in another country or another city, we feel very good about that.
To find out which generation of trolley you're riding on, simply look at the numbers on the front and sides of the cars. A 2000 means it's 2nd generation, a 3000 3rd generation, and so on. MTS is in the process of restoring its first trolley ever and plans to put it back in service soon. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
A handful of these first-generation trolleys are in museums across the country. Locally, you can find one at the San Diego Electric Railway Association in National City.
I'm Amna Nawaz. Tonight on the NewsHour, protests and pageantry as President Trump visits the British royal family amid criticism for insulting London's mayor. It's coming up at 7 right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Southern California Edison has fixed enough of its safety problems to resume transferring nuclear waste at San Onofre. KPBS science and technology reporter Shalina Chatlani says the decision comes almost a year after a near accident.
The explanation comes 2 weeks after the Nuclear Regulatory Commission already gave the green light to resume transfers. In a public webinar, Linda Howell of the NRC said Edison's corrective actions following the near accident were satisfactory and that it had addressed concerns of canisters scratching while being lowered into dry storage underground. She says regulators will still be keeping an eye on what the utility does next.
Once the licensee resumes fuel transfer operations, we will initiate unannounced inspections that will be performed frequently to observe the licensee's implementation of their enhanced programs.
Howell says Edison will complete more training and equipment analysis before it resumes. However, some members of the public are still concerned that these canisters may not last more than several decades. Shalina Chatlani, KPBS News.
We're experiencing some June gloom out there. Meteorologist Erin Calandra will tell us just how long it's expected to stick around.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the weekend and also your day today. It was kind of cloudy out there. We have a low pressure system out in the Pacific, and it's driving in all of this thick marine layer, and it's actually cruising in a bit further east than we're used to. It's butting right up against the mountains, and then it's slowly clearing out from the east to the west. And with that, we're seeing just a little bit of drizzle in some spots. So that's a little bit unusual, not what we see typically, but by the end of the day, most of us have some beautiful sunshine. Taking a look at the bigger picture, it is quiet in the southwest. Finally, we're getting a break. 63 for the temperature tonight in the metro, and again, those clouds will be building. Borrego Springs at 70 for the low. El Cajon reaching 62 degrees. Tomorrow will be gorgeous. That low pressure system gliding off to the east, getting out of the way. We're going to have some sunshine, and temperatures will be increasing. It's going to be very pleasant the next several days. Ramona at 82, El Cajon as well. San Diego reaching 70 for the high with sunshine. Mount Laguna at 72 and sunny. The end of the week looking good. Finally, we have a nice ridge developing here. Rather than a trough, and that means we have an influence of warmer air coming up from the south. So it's going to stay really nice for the southwest, as it should be, but we are going to see some flooding downpours. Right across the deep south, this region certainly doesn't need rain. They're going to get a lot of it, so flooding is going to be a big issue there. Expect to see sunshine each day. Maybe a few clouds at times. Temperatures will be cruising through those low 70s each day. Inland, we get into the 80s by Wednesday and into Thursday, and then it cools down slightly, the upper 70s for the weekend with sunshine. And in the deserts, we're in the 100s. Drink lots of water, try to get indoors and take breaks. Friday and Saturday, it'll be in those mid-90s with sunshine, and in the mountains, comfortable. We're in the 70s much of the week, reaching 69. That will be the coolest day of the week, and that will be on Friday. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra. Back to you.
A California doctor has written a book to teach people how to overcome anxiety. It's called Freedom from Anxious Thoughts and Feelings, and Dr. Scott Symington is here to tell us more about it. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
So, from your experience as a clinical psychologist, how prevalent would you say are anxiety disorders?
Very prevalent. The recent figures suggest that approximately 40 million U.S. adults each year carry an anxiety disorder diagnosis, and that's not even accounting for your average worrier and person experiencing anxiety that's constricting their life.
So why is it important to address anxiety?
When you're chronically stressed or feeling anxious, that is incredibly taxing to your body and even your brain. There's some interesting research coming out about the impact on the hippocampus, which is responsible for emotional regulation and memory. So you're doing a lot of harm to your person if you stay in that chronically stressed and anxious place.
So what can you tell us about the two-screen method?
Yeah, it's a user-friendly application of mindfulness. So essentially, it shows you what to do inside your head, the specific mental and emotional steps when you begin worrying or feeling anxious, so that you can free your mind from that worry and diffuse that overwhelming feeling. You have a mental image that naturally organizes your internal experience, and then you're guided through very specific steps, mentally and emotionally on the inside, on how to de-energize problematic thoughts and feelings. And the image is a media room with two screens, where you have a front screen, which is the present moment and the more positive and life-giving thoughts, feelings, and images. And then off to the right, still inside your head, is a side screen. And that's where the fears, worries, insecurities, and potentially destructive feelings show up. And so the method is all about how do you relate to the side screen in a way where it fades into the background, and how do you stay more tethered to the front screen so you can cultivate a greater level of well-being.
Do you think that if more people with anxiety disorders practice this two-screen method, that fewer of them would need prescription medication?
I do believe so, yeah, and that has been my experience in my clinical practice.
So if mindfulness can help, why aren't more people doing it?
I think part of it is spreading the word, and that's part of why I wrote the book too, is I wanted to share a user-friendly method of applying something that really can give people relief, because people don't have to stay stuck in chronic anxiety and worry. There is a lot of help out there, and I'm hoping that this method will be one link in the chain to help people.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
A big election south of the border. We now have a new governor of Baja California and the mayor of Tijuana. KPBS reporter Milena Spitzer says this could have major implications for San Diego.
That's Jaime Bonilla, a close ally of Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. He's declaring victory in the race for governor of Baja California. Bonilla has unseated the conservative National Action Party, PAN, from the governorship, with 50.7% of the vote, 30 points ahead of his closest rival. Bonilla, an engineer from Tijuana, says residents of Baja California voted for change after years of corruption.
It's been 30 years of abuse, 30 years of repression, 30 years of marginalization, and the people said enough.
Here in San Diego, the Baja elections could impact trade, migration, and the environment. Professor Ev Mead is the director of the Transborder Institute here at the University of San Diego.
At least the initial signs that in Mexico anyway, the human rights are not going to be juxtaposed against the reality of migration. In other words, there's going to be some kind of respect for the human rights of migrants and a desire to deal with the problem beginning in its roots.
Mead says when it comes to the environment, Bonilla understands San Diego's water issues after 12 years as an elected official for the Otay Water Board of Directors in Chula Vista.
So I think at a very practical level, I'm very hopeful that having somebody who understands at an engineering level how the water issue works is a great thing. And someone who has good political and civic contacts on both sides, again, that must be a bonus. On the other hand, he's part of a party that does have a populist streak, and he himself has a populist streak. So on other environmental issues, for example, like protecting endangered species like the vaquita marina. Bonilla has been perfectly content to get up on the stump and say that he values the fishermen of San Felipe more than the vaquita marina, essentially saying the environmentalists have killed off the fishing industry in Baja California.
Mead also expects the rise of the Morena Party to have an impact on trade negotiations, creating a united front in tariff negotiations with President Trump. Milena Spitzer, KPBS News.
Now here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. We're talking to the San Diego Fire Authority about potential wildfire risk this fire season and how to get prepared. And on Midday Edition, a trip back in time with Shakespeare, what's coming to the Old Globe Theater. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.